Last year I got an opportunity to teach a class in a prison in Fort Dix prison. It's all east of Trenton. And I teach solar installation classes. That's what I do for a living. And I used to teach high school. So it worked really well. And first they go through the whole vetting process and background check, and I passed that, surprisingly. And I have to, then you go to your orientation. And your orientation is, mostly what they're trying to do is scare you. And to make sure that you remember every day exactly where you are. They first have a 45-minute dissertation on if you ever held hostage. And then which is a lot of details. They also talk about contraband. And they talk about contraband a lot. And make sure that you realize that if you were ever caught bringing anything that they think is illegal, they can keep you there. It's just, and I always remember. And also, they make sure that you realize that, they tell you not to shake anybody's hands. And it's just kind of something that seems a little harsh at first, but then you realize that once you go in there, you don't want to touch anything anyway. Because it's just kind of gross. It's what it is. So I'm there for about 2 weeks, and I'm talking to, going over some of the math with some of the students, and we're all kind of walking around, and there's about 30 of them. You start to get really used to them, even though they're all wearing khaki and have all the names on the thing. And I start to realize I'm just kind of swaying a little bit back and forth. And I look outside, and the fence is swaying. And I realize there's an earthquake, and I'm in New Jersey, and I'm locked in this room in the middle of New Jersey. And so I go outside. I go outside the room. I tell the other instructor, hold on a second. And I go to open the door. And I realize that it's locked, because all the doors are locked. They're not going to give me a key. I don't get trusted with that sort of thing. They don't let me walk, roll around the compound. They have these big keys that open nuclear silos, these big things. And my first instinct is, where's the emergency exit? Now, it's probably against the belief system of a prison just in general. They don't have emergency exits. So I turn around and I'm like, shit, what am I even going to do? And I can hear them, and they're getting loud. And I just, after that whole dissertation, all these other things, I get this, kind of my mind goes a little crazy, and I'm walking down the hall, and they're getting loud, and all I can see is, if you ever taught high school or anybody, you got to keep them under control, because if you don't, they start going nuts. And I'm walking down the street, and I'm like, I'm not going to get held hostage. This isn't going to happen to me. And I go, and I know what you're thinking. You're like, I was on Broad Street, and I barely felt the earthquake. But, I'm in a prison. You're among your peers. I don't have any emergency exits. I have Jimbo and Bubba, checking me out every day. Every day when they come in, and they're just, how you doing, Mr. James? And so I go and I turn the corner, I can hear him, and I look at the one guy in the back, and he's yelling out the window, and I'm like, are you fucking seriously yelling out the window right now? And did you ever say anything really stupid at one time, maybe to your husband or your wife? And I'm looking at him, and he's just turns around and kind of stares at me for a second. And I'm hoping, and you also, whenever you say something really stupid, you hope they didn't hear you. That was, but I know he heard me because everybody sat down immediately, and he's just staring at me, and now we're staring at each other, and I still have this look on my face like, well, explain yourself. And he's staring, and we have a staring contest, and he's winning. I'm getting smaller and smaller, and he's sitting there thinking about something, and in my head I realized, I'm like, I wonder if he's thinking about whether he's going to kill me, right now. I'm in prison. He takes a half step at me, and he just and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, don't kill me, whatever. And so he sits down, and we're waiting for 10 minutes. And finally, one of the women from education comes up, and she's like, "Oh, I forgot about you. I'm so sorry." And we go downstairs, and it was funny because the warden's walking around, and he reminded me of Mayor Nutter. He's just always got 5 people behind him. He's just making decisions, talking on phones, and so they escort us out. And so I'm there, and it's one of the last days, and there's this big guy, this big Muslim guy, and I know that because he takes off on Fridays to pray. I have no problem with that, and I really don't care. But so he gets up and he stands in front of everybody and he says, "Listen, I know." And by the way, he's been there for 13 years. 13 years, and he says he's in there for a silencer charge, which think the fourth line. But Clinton administration, you know, he's been there for a long time, and he says, I know it's really difficult to come in here, and I've been here a long time, and I don't want to come back, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. And they all stand up and give us a standing ovation. And it was funny because I was sitting there thinking about the whole handshake thing with them, and if it's against like your culture to shake hands, I know I think in Afghanistan they don't shake hands because they wipe their asses with the right hand, and that's a good reason to not shake somebody's hand. But it's a little bit different here. What they're saying is, I'll shake hands with other people, but I won't shake hands with you. And just saying, just by that definition, that we're not equals. And I try not to think that way about anybody, anywhere, ever. So I make sure to look them all straight in the eye and shake all their hands and wish them good luck.